Okay, we've got a guy here, it looks like he's been in a fight. Just got on to the QRF to go send out an ambulance to pick him up. Okay, let's go.
Australian Defence Force personnel have served overseas in many theatres of action with the United Nations since its inception. Most of the Australian forces have been only small observer groups. In the 1990s, all this changed, and Australia has sent large contingents from her Navy, Army and Air Force to some of the most dangerous conflicts on the planet. Some missions to keep the peace, others to make the peace.
A lot of the guys benefited from the actual experiences they had over there and actually putting the training that they've been training for into like a real life situation.
A friend of mine who was in my platoon rang up and said, they're looking for people to go to Cambodia. Do you want me to put your name down for you? And I said, yeah, for sure. I mean, I'd jump at the opportunity to go. And then I didn't hear any more about it for quite a while. And then we're sitting down to Christmas lunch and the phone rings and my sister answered the phone and she said, Craig, there's a sergeant on the phone for you.
You've got all your friends and your mates around you. It's like a big, a big trip away. Everyone's a bit excited about, oh, we're being deployed overseas for the first time in 20 years and all the gung-ho stuff that goes with that.
You don't go to training during the week to not play on Saturday sort of thing. Yeah, we wanted to put the stuff that we knew into practice.
Thinking when I got back, a lot of people, were bitter about us being out there because I think they just had the wrong idea on what we're being over there for. I think they thought we were going over there to fight, but it wasn't for fighting. It was to somehow try to bring peace.
Australian peacekeeping troops left Brisbane for Cambodia this morning. 95 soldiers from all over the country held a final parade at Gallipoli Barracks. As well as friends and family, Defence Science Minister Gordon Bilding was there to farewell the troops.
2 days before they left to go, one of the guys, something had happened with him and he couldn't go. So the CO that was doing the intakes, he was also going to Cambodia with us, selected me to go on 2 days' notice. So I had to ring up my parents and, quick, I'm going to Cambodia.
I, along with 90% of other naval personnel, put their request form in to go. Every naval person wanted to go.
Nobody can actually come back from Cambodia, so they never changed. Every single person changed. A lot of people grew up overnight just from extra responsibilities, stuff like that. A lot of anticipation before we went over on, how it'd be, and basically nothing turned out the way we thought it'd be.
Being in the Air Force, it's a not a laid-back sort of force, but it's sort of the most laid-back out of all three. And I went over there not realising that it'd be so full-on, so to speak. That was my mistake.
Everyone was excited about going because it was a chance to actually do your job. I've been in the Army 5 years before that, and all we'd done is train. You'd never actually done anything that was for real. Finally, here we were, getting a chance to go overseas and make a difference. And it wasn't going overseas to kill people, which is, I'm an infantryman, and that is our basic role. But it was going overseas to help people, and that seemed important to me.
You listen to things on the television and you hear all these things on the radio about how terrible it is over there, and you just sort of think, oh, well, that's really bad. But when you're actually going over there and you're having updated reports told to you through these various lectures, in the days before we went overseas, you sort of think, my God, what are we going to be in for?
We were uncertain about what to expect when we got to Cambodia and about what our actual job would be.
Feelings I had when we first landed. I remember walking through the aircraft doors and standing on the steps looking around, and the heat was the first thing I noticed. It just hits you like a ton of bricks. The smells, it's hard to describe.
It was a weird experience because it was like nothing I'd ever seen before. This airport was just so derelict. It was unbelievable.
When we landed over there, it was very dry. There was, they hadn't had much rain. There was no water laying around, and the heat was incredible. The heat and the smell, because with the way they live, the rubbish, and everything like that, it's just lays outside, and in tropical heat, it just picks up the stench you wouldn't believe. They took us from the airport and they drove us straight out to the Australian base, which is called Pattaya Australia, which is Cambodian for Australian home.
I got into Cambodia. There was like big holes in the road. There wasn't hardly any roads. It was all sort of dirt and rock. The gutters was just filled with dirty paper. I felt so sorry for them when I saw their housing. They were like stumps, like sort of what we'd have as dog boxes. They were sort of living in them, and there'd be up to 10 people living in one of the little boxes.
The main job over there was for the elections to be run, and to do that there had to be basically a group in every province, and there had to be a military presence in each province to prove to the people that the UN was serious about running elections. Basically the Australians' job over there was to go out to the deaths and set up communications for everything from casualty evacuations for accidents with soldiers and sometimes civilians.
We were very much aware that we were on a peacekeeping mission only. Within the Army there's a thing called rules of engagement, and this is issued to you, and this is what you must follow before you can open fire to defend yourself. And within the Australian Army there are two different types. There's the yellow card and there's the red card. If you're on the yellow card, the procedures you must go through to open fire are very, very strict. On the red card they're not as strict, and one is for opposed operations and one is for peacekeeping operations. And I mean, it was drummed into us that we weren't here to force the peace. The peace had already been negotiated in Paris, and we were here just to help with the election process.
Contoned figures 1484. Present, I spell Papa Romeo Echo, Sierra Echo November Tango, 00 multiplier.
Basically our job was, as an advance party, was to go in and go to the outlying deaths and set everything up so when the main body got over there, the accommodation, the deaths and the radio nets were all set up, ready to go.
Being in such a third world country, coming from Australia, the experiences I had over there did change my outlook on a lot of things. Working with the different nationalities and with the Khmerian people themselves changes your outlook on life. You realise how lucky we are here.
My feelings towards what they'd done to the people was utterly tragic. I mean, the interpreter that we lived with, he was the only surviving member of his family. The rest had been killed by either on the march from where they were to Battambang, or subsequently by the Khmer Rouge at the end of when the Vietnamese were coming. And it was just so senseless. Why would you want to do something like that to people? I mean, it makes no sense to me.
We went on a tour when we first got there, and they showed us the killing fields and the Genocide Museum. The killing fields were just something you would not experience in a normal life. You'd walk through into, there was a major, like a building with all glass windows, and in that was sort of just heads of people, heads and bits of bones and everything. You could see it through the glass. It was on platforms. And then you'd walk through the actual fields, and they'd have the dugout graves, all the different big holes where the graves and everything were, and you'd walk through and there'd be like bits of bones still sticking out. And I can vividly remember walking through and there was just like a bit of a red T-shirt like stuck in the mud, and just bits of clothing and things like that you'd find just like lying around, and just dug into the dirt, and barbed wire and everything like that, just bits of their bodies and bits of leftover bits, what hadn't been dug up and had been dug up and not put in the actual museum thing. We went through the Genocide Museum as well. That was a museum where they tortured the Khmer people. As you walk in, down one side of the wall is just a big red blood stain. And it's like, it's been there for years and it just won't wash out. It's that sort of blood stain. And you'd walk into the rooms of the different sections, they'd show you like machines they tortured people with, big buckets of water things that they'd dunk people in. They had a map of Cambodia made out of skulls and bones on one of the walls. They'd show you pictures with like your serial number on of all the different people, like in different states. Some were, the faces were unbeaten, and some were beaten really badly with big swollen eyes and that sort of thing.
Well, I've heard about it, and I've seen the movie, but to actually go there, it was, in my own mind, it was kind of eerie. I mean, the area on display is a small area, but the paddocks that go for acres out the back, well, that's all the killing fields. It's just a vast area. They're amazing people, the Cambodians. To rebuild their city after decades of war and corruption, but to see them battle on and to see that they all smile. I mean, the children smile and they play just like our children play, but our children play with swings and toys, and they don't have that.
And the kids were loving. It's very hard to describe all the feelings that I feel when I think back. Maybe that's why when I come back I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to talk about it. It's very hard.
Possibly the worst thing for Cambodia was missing out on a year of my daughter's life. She grew up so much. She was 2 when I left, and in that 12-month period she grew up so much, and I missed out on a lot of it. The children over there, when I was in Sisophon, we were surrounded by a local village, and we'd often get the little kids coming in, and you'd give them a can of Coke or something, and be sort of like, you're just giving them $1 million. It was something that they'd never seen before. I sort of didn't think about them in the same way that I thought about my daughter, just because of the difference between the cultures, sort of thing. It wasn't their fault that they were being brought up this way in this environment, and that sort of saddened me a little bit. I don't think any child should be brought up in that sort of environment. And so I suppose I realise how lucky my daughter is that she's over here.
The school started, it was there. We lived very close to the school, and on a daily basis we could see that there was a school there and see what was going on. And we could see that there were quite a lot of students over there. And we actually had contact with the teacher too. He came over here and just sort of poked his head in, because he also was learning English at the moment and wanted to speak, to actually talk to someone. So he came over and spoke to him. And I had just this idea that I'd really like to get involved in what was going on, because at that stage we'd been here about a month, I suppose. And I said, well, our job here is taxing in some ways, but in a lot of ways we have spare time. So it meant that I could actually do this and not actually interfere in what I was doing sort of here. So I spoke to the teacher, contacted with him and explained my idea, and he said, yes, we can do it. And we took it from there. I think 2 days later, I took my first class. And it's pretty much progressed from there.
The problem with Cambodia was that, like Australia, alcohol is extremely prevalent. However, unlike Australia, everyone is also heavily armed. I remember a specific incident was that we were just got our supplies off the helicopter, and the helicopter had taken off, and we heard an explosion from down the village. And that being the job of the police that were with us, went down to investigate it. We got down to this hut, and what had happened was some people had been playing cards, and the one guy had lost quite a bit of money. So in his aggravation, he walked outside, grabbed the hand grenade, and threw a hand grenade into the room where the people had been playing cards, and it wounded a couple of the people. After he'd done that, he'd run away. So we loaded the wounded people into one of our vehicles and drove them to the hospital. And when we came back, the Cambodian police were searching through this elephant grass. It's like a long, sharp grass, to looking for this man. And the guy came running out of the grass, and the policeman just pulled out his pistol and just shot him from. It was only about 7 feet away from me, and you know, this guy's head just exploded all over the place. And I mean, I was sick straight away. I'd never seen anyone die like that before.
When I was over there, February the 13th, it was the first major attack. It was when the first Australian soldier retaliated with bullets. It was when I was on night shift, me and Trooper Rose. We were on night shift together, and we heard all this sort of shelling. There was a joke that every time I went to the bathroom, we would get attacked. And like, I'd just been to the bathroom, and on my way back, there was a loud boom. And anyway, we stood with the door open, and then all of a sudden there was another one, which was rather close to us. As I loaded magazines onto the weapons, Trooper Rose went round and woke the rest of the troop up that weren't already awake from the noise. And Corporal Williams was the first person to shoot back. He shot 11 rounds. And like the bandits or soldiers or whatever they were, went into the capital city, shot up around there. I know they killed 3 Cambodians and 11 were wounded. And then they came back and had another sort of shooting round at us and took off again.
The country is very beautiful. Not so in the built-up city area. The rice paddies from above, it looks like a golf course below, and just scattered palm trees everywhere. And they look like greens. And we were told not to venture anywhere off the road or off any footpaths to the mines.
The locals were very friendly towards us, particularly the Australians, I feel. The other nationalities were there. Some had problems with the locals. I think that's because they didn't try and fit in with them. The Australians would go down to the marketplaces and try and learn Khmer and talk to the locals in their own language rather than trying to push English onto them, trying to make them learn English. We'd try and learn their language. And generally, the relations were very good.
Local food, I think I've eaten everything, walked, crawled, run, or used to. Everybody's got a story about the restaurants. The restaurants are totally different. You walk in and you have to get the dogs off the seats and the pigs and that. And there was one stage I had to run down my own chicken before I could eat it. And you will order a chicken or something like that at the local restaurant, and you'll see the old lady going out the back and then absolutely throttle a chicken to death before she plucks it, walks back in, and it's served onto your plate a few minutes later. It's pretty horrifying sometimes. There was one stage where I think the chicken ate more of the vegetables than what I did.
Okay. Thank you. Yes, no, it is okay.
The guys sort of treated us like their sisters, and because around us there was the French Foreign Legion, the Indians, all different sort of nationalities, and if like the English or the French had come into the comm centre to pick up messages or whatever and they'd start chatting you up, one of the guys would sort of intervene and, excuse me, sort of thing, she's with us.
The people you met over there, I made a lot of friends over there from other countries, Dutch soldiers that I met there, and a couple of others, the UNMOs that I met, and a couple of officers there were really good from other countries and that. And the other people from the Australian Army that I'd never met before. And when you put in a situation like that, you have to put in a large effort to accept them, and they have to accept you. And I think it brought on a lot of good friendships that probably last for a long time.
One of the best things that came out of being in Cambodia was I met my husband over there. I was fairly lucky. When I came back to Australia in October, we met up again. October '93, sorry, we met up again, and got married in March this year and had a baby in September.
For me, the best experience that I had was towards the end, about the last 2.5, 3 months. I worked in a place called Tabang Meanchey, and it was way out on right up near the Laotian border, and it was the most isolated place, probably the most isolated troop location in Cambodia. And I worked with a really good bunch of Australians there and Kiwis. I was lucky to be in a mixed det. We had half Kiwis and half Australians. And that last 3 months of good, it was hard work because we had to set up a new location because we weren't there before. Setting that up and living there and getting everything organised, and the friendship I made with those people and the good times that we had together and some of the bad times really do stick out of my mind as the best time I had in Cambodia.
Buồn vào hôn không quên, thức giấc nửa đêm nhớ chuyện xưa vào đời. Đường phố vắng đêm nào quên một người mà yêu thương chốn trao nhau nụ cười. Để rồi làm sao anh biết tên người yêu những mèo đi đường về, và có biết đêm nào ta hẹn hò để yêu thương nhưng đêm ngủ không yên.
I think the thing with Somalia was that when we first went over to Cambodia, it was a big thing, but then Somalia took over. I remember at one stage my father rang me up and he said, "You're lucky you're not in Somalia." He said they've been shot at. They got shot at over there the other day, and I sort of had to break the news to him that I'd already been shot at twice.
An hour from now, hundreds more Australian soldiers will touch down at Mogadishu Airport, the first of Australia's main force to arrive in Somalia.
The funny thing was, you didn't hear those build-up rumours about Somalia, or I certainly didn't hear them within the unit, and I think that would be the case for most people. And then all of a sudden, they just turned around and said, "You're going to Somalia?" And everyone said, "Yeah, sure we are." Another rumour. And that day, we said, "No, we're going. Here are the preliminary plans. Start getting ready." And everyone was just, it was unbelievable because I was due to go on Christmas leave that day. That was my last day of the unit before Christmas. And I said, "No, you're not going anywhere. You've got to stay back here and prepare the vehicles to be deployed." And everyone was walking around stunned. Couldn't believe that we're actually going. And we're going like we're sending 90 personnel, 35 vehicles or whatever it was. And I don't think it hit home for a couple of days.
I just thought, when I'm on the plane, on our way, that's when I'll start worrying. But I never really got my hopes up to go over.
So when it did actually happen, obviously it was very exciting, of course, extremely exciting. But more than that, it was surprising that we actually were going to go somewhere and that we were actually going to have a chance to do our real job and also to show people, our ability. As we got closer to Somalia, in the big Qantas plane, beautiful plane too, the adrenaline was certainly pumping, we were all very excited, very apprehensive, not quite sure what to expect, because none of us had ever been, myself had never been put in this situation before, where we were going to go to a foreign country and perform our duties of peacemaking in that country.
Then we landed, got off the plane, and you're always brought back down to earth by your mates, cracking jokes about whatever, but you couldn't help but think of the serious reason why you were here and what you were expected to do.
I was definitely very excited to go. I mean, what a great opportunity. As I've said before, it hadn't happened before, for 20 years before that. Apprehensive in a lot of ways, sort of not really knowing what I'd be doing, what we're facing. I mean, who are they over there really? What will we be doing? What will I be doing? Will it be dangerous?
And then when we landed and we got outside the door, I think the door had just opened and we started walking down the stairs and someone had started shooting us already. We were all milling around outside the old Qantas plane, thinking, "Oh, this is great, we're in Africa, what's going on here, And next minute we heard a rifle shot and everyone's diving on the ground behind crates and stuff. I didn't even know what was going on. I was wandering around going, "What's going on?" And then someone said, "Oh, someone's shooting at the plane. When we got to Baydoa, it was a pretty safe area. I mean, the Yanks and the Americans and the French had been there for a little while, and they got rid of most of the bandits, as they'll call it, the warlords. So it was fairly safe. We still had a few nutters running around with guns and stuff. Be here.
Essentially, there were four main tasks. They were urban patrolling, which was, as it sounds, patrolling through the streets of Baydoa. We had airfield security. At the airfield in Baydoa is where the battalion headquarters was situated, and one of the companies would secure that area there. Also, there was long-range patrolling, where one of the companies would go all around our area of operations, and they'd generally be mounted in APCs, and they would search, clear those areas, and the last task was food convoy protection, which, as it sounds, was just simply protecting the food getting out to the people.
Baydoa was a very grubby little place, mainly ramshackle type sheds, and buildings were constructed out of about, compared to our concrete, it was like sand. They used to put rocks and mix a little bit of concrete with it, and sort of glue it all together, and paint it all pink or white. But all the buildings were very close together in the town itself. It was definitely a third world country. It was a very dirty place. It stunk. The place was very rank, and the marketplace itself was it was an eye opener. The first time I went in there, I remember going through the meat market. They have a type of ritual where they don't knock the beast out. They just stick it in the throat and bleed it. It's a Muslim custom. I'm not sure what it's called. And the meat will hang up there until 3, 4, maybe 5 in the afternoon with the flies buzzing all over it. Nothing to keep the flies off, and they'll still buy it. But the smell of that place, there's mud on the ground about 2 or 3 inches thick, and the smell of the place is, it made a couple of my blokes, or one of my blokes in particular, a little bit nauseous there on one occasion.
The APC stands for Armoured Personnel Carrier. Basically, I guess the best way to explain to people, it's like a small tank that has a crew commander who sits in a turret with 2 machine guns, and he has a driver in the driver's hole, which is situated down in front of him. They have communication between the two of them, and they work as a crew. Now, the infantry, which comprises of usually 8 or 9 people, but we can carry up to 11, they sit in the back. When they need to be deployed, the driver drops the ramp, which is at the back of the vehicle, and the infantry run out the back. An APC is not the coolest place to be in any sort of climate. Quite often we were wearing the protective vests, sitting in the vehicle all day, the sun beating down, and no overhead protection. It got extremely hot in there. I remember one day being in town, we were doing a sector search through town, and I had to crawl through to the back compartment and just sit there with a basin of water just pouring it over my head. It was just that hot. And we found out later in the day that, it had reached a top of 56 or something ridiculous.
Groupings and tasks, 7 platoon, groupings no change. Tony, your tasks, you'll move from this location to a hide location that you can choose, and we'll discuss that after these orders. You will prop in that location and move to and set up your blocking position vicinity feature 17. You are to be prepared to move to and secure objective 5 on order.
The air inside the APC is a mixture of diesel fumes and dust. You get a strong smell of the diesel that runs the APC. There's a hatch that opens directly above where the infantry sit, and if it's a dusty road, nothing but dust gets churned up by the wheels, and if you're the second vehicle and third, fourth and so on, all you get is dust in through there mixed with your diesel fumes. But it's not too bad. So, what do they call it? A second class ride's better than a first class walk, they say.
The first contact that we had was, we're patrolling down the streets at night, and we were patrolling along, and it was like a T-junction, and I stopped in the middle of the road because I heard some sounds. I turned around, and I had night vision goggles up, and I was looking around. I saw a guy sitting down probably about 5 to 10 metres away, and he didn't look that suspicious at all, so I thought, well, must be nothing, he's just sitting there. But he was talking to himself, which made me like wonder what was going on. And then I just thought, well, I'll keep going. So I kept going, and as I kept going, I hit some rocks on the ground, and the guy started yelling. I turned around, and he stood up, and he'd walked inside, and I'd heard an AK get cocked. So I thought, well, I've got to do something here. So I initiated the contact, which is where I started shooting him first. He was standing at the doorway, and he just put the barrel out the door, so I started shooting. The rest of the section all went to ground, except that I didn't go to ground because I was standing in the middle of a road, and if I'd probably went to ground, I reckon that maybe I probably wouldn't be here today. I think it was probably about 5:30 in the morning at that time, and the sun was just starting to come up, and my rifle wasn't working. It wouldn't fire or nothing. I had a look, and I couldn't figure out what was wrong, and then I saw a hole right above where the the pistol grip is, where you hold onto it. There's a hole going in one side and a hole going out the other side, and I kind of like went, I thought that I must have been shot by a round, and everyone else had a look at it, and they all agreed that a round had gone through there. And then I picked up the MVGs to have a look how much damage I thought I'd done to them, and found that there was a bullet hole going through the top of it, and a bullet hole going straight through one of the lenses. And then I was like really getting worried now, and I thought, oh well, I don't think anything else on me's been hit. And then there was a hole in my pants which someone had pointed out to me, and I had a look, and it was the perfect size for a 7.62 round. So I ended up with a hole in my pants, 2 of my MVGs and 1 from my rifle.
Ain't got one, mate.
You go through that one?
Johnny? What's that way?
Something.
What's that way?
Tiny, this one's a smart ass.
Is he?
The NGOs would let us know that, okay, this Tuesday we are going out to supply food to this village out here and medical treatment. Okay, that's fine. We would go down in about a section's worth of carriers, 4 carriers and a platoon of infantry, and we would escort those, whether it be 2 or whether it be 6 of these NGO vehicles. They quite often contained people from, Sweden or Australians or whatever the organisation was, whether it be CARE or whatever.
With the food convoy protection, generally we'd be met by the NGO, which was the non-government officials, early in the morning, probably between 7 and 8 o'clock, and they would have a certain village, as well as the food and the trucks and the drivers, and they'd have that village where they'd have to drop off the supplies, whether that be sorghum or wheat or even farming products. They would have their certain area that they'd have to go to, and we would be simply providing them with the protection.
Mentano?
Yeah.
Yes. We were in Mentano 2 days ago and we gave you food. What are you doing here stealing from these people?
About that? He's hit him on the head and then ran off the box. Everyone started screaming and yelling. He's thrown the box behind the bushes and went and hit another bushes, but we basically accidentally went around and got it.
Tell him that we know he hit that woman across the head with a stick, took her box. Tell him we know that.
This is the woman?
Yeah, this woman.
Okay.
Once we get to the village, we would then set up an area for them to distribute the food to the locals. Often that meant the army getting involved in controlling the locals, because as you can understand, these people are fairly desperate and fairly keen to get some food or tools or whatever it may be. So they would generally sort of be fairly aggressive, especially the men, aggressive towards the soldiers and also towards the NGOs, to try and get in, to make sure they got what they deserved, whether it be a bag of wheat or whatever. And if they could get 2 bags of wheat, well then they'd be up there trying to get 2 bags.
The Bay Well project was another section down at the Bay Well project. That was like a water pump, I think it was a bore, and they used to pump water up, and it was quite, it was like cattle trying to get in and get a feed, and there was only a little bit of feed, but we had to have them lined up. There was barbed wire chutes for the women to come in with their little bottles of water, whatever they could carry water, and they'd come in carrying as many as they could, and they'd fill up their water and go back to their huts. They used to line up for 6-7 hours just to get a bottle of water at a time, and every now and then it used to get a little bit out of hand. They'd have riots and they'd be pushing and shoving and pushing people in through this razor wire. Yeah, they were keen. They were keen to get a drink. I suppose they were pretty thirsty.
Any problems he has with that? His health?
On those sides, prohibits to buy the money, to buy the water.
I'm telling you, right? No one pays for water in that water hole. No one pays water for any water holes along this creek line, right? If I see people making people pay money in any of these water holes along here, I'll grab them and I'll throw them out. Okay? You tell that to him, and you tell that to him.
I'll tell you. Some of the elders of the city have called to me to
the elders in town are not telling him what he can do with these wells. Only people that can tell him what to do with these wells are us. Right? My bosses at work out of the airfield, right? If he's going to be charging money, he's to have a permit from us and only us. Until that day, he will not be able to charge for any water. Okay? Before him, I saw one person up there getting water out and at least 70 people standing there wanting water. That is not the way it should work, and it's not the way it's going to work.
You sit there and you think about your family a lot more, and you start, getting a bit homesick and stuff because of what was going on around you was It was a dump, and everything was down. It was like you just wanted a high for a little while, and you'd go and sit and think about your family, try and get a bit of happiness back in your day. Because some days there were that you'd just be on a downer all day, because you just look around and you see sorrow in people and the unhappiness that was going on over there, and eventually start rubbing off on you, and you'd have your days where you were just down all day, and you'd get short-tempered, and you're living with guys, for months on end, in close contact with the guys, and you get sick of them, and a bit of bickering would start, and you just have to go for a wander off somewhere. It was good to sit back and think about your family, and sort of realise how lucky you really were. I did miss my son growing up, but I sort of got a lot of photos sent over and stuff, so that wasn't too bad. I did miss my son a lot, yeah, because of having such close contact with the kids over there. You always had your own children in the back of your mind and what they were doing and whether they were running around having a good time or not. It was always in the back of your mind. You got reminded every day of your loved ones back home.
So I think she just got lonely, and she just met someone else in a shop who was working next door, and being a bit of a sly bugger, he done the dirty on me, I suppose. Well, they both did. So they come back to pretty much nothing. It's an empty house, really, and start again from scratch.
It surprised me, actually, that in Baydoa itself, there weren't a great deal of starving people. They were hungry and they weren't well fed, but they weren't starving to the point where you see on the ads and so on that they're skin and bone. There was occasionally a couple that come through, and there was a lot of problems in the actual orphanages where the children had been orphaned and they couldn't get enough food to the orphanages. So there was a lot of starving kids in the orphanages, which was a shame. Actually, one of the points that a lot of the blokes brought up, that the kids actually got to them more than the rest of the country. So you've seen the kids the way they were. A lot of the kids sort of twanged a bit of the boys' hearts, sort of thing. So they were pretty good looking after the kids. I know one day I found a little child who was under a tree and he was just about gone. I think he had, I think they said it was tuberculosis or something like that, one of the diseases they get over there, and he couldn't hold any fluid and that, and sort of, they said they couldn't help him in any way, so. And a lot of the mothers were bringing the children out to the medical teams, and they were too far gone, and you could see in the medical teams they were frustrated because they didn't have the stuff to fix these kids.
We've seen quite a few very poor small children. There was one case where we were on a VCP, vehicle checkpoint, and we unloaded a truck of people. They stacked so many people on a truck. We counted 48 people on a Hilux at one time when we got them all off and counted them as they went back on. And we unloaded this truck, and there was this tiny little baby, and it was just a skeleton with the skin over it. It was terrible. And this woman was coming from Baydoa going to Kismayo, and we wanted to know why the baby wasn't put into a health food program into one of the compounds. And she said, "Oh, no, Tom, only this is all the money that I have to get on this truck and go to Kismayo." So before they got to Kismayo, the baby would have died. Its mouth was open. It couldn't cry because it didn't have the energy, and yeah, it was in a bad way.
We collected a lot of mines that the villagers would hand in. They were forever bringing you up munitions and rounds from all sorts of weapons that were still live, and they'd bring them up because they thought it was great. Bring them up to your carrier and say, "Oh, hold them up, here you go, here you go." And of course we'd have to carry these great loads of munitions, and whether it was bullets or mortar shells or all sorts of things like that, real cross range of weapons, and we'd have to carry them back to Baydoa or wherever and sort of stockpile them. And there was always, whenever you were occupying a compound, there was always one corner that was left spare for all these unexploded things. They were, "Please, let's get the engineers here quickly and get rid of this caseload of stuff." I remember a couple of times when we were in Barakabar, they would get all these unexploded munitions, put them in an area, bury them, and then they would, the engineers would use their own explosives to sort of blow it up in one big stockpile. And of course that involved clearing the area of people. Of course you've always got your group of onlookers waiting to see, oh, what's all the big deal? Well, what's all the commotion? We jump in the carriers and go like a kilometre down the end of each road and block traffic and keep people back, because you needed like about 1,000 metre radius, safety radius. The one thing that always sticks in my mind was when we arrived in a place called Barakaba, which is a township about 60 kilometres from Baidoa, and we spent quite a bit of time there, just doing the patrolling and the cordon searching and whatever. But when we got there, the children had drawn pictures on the walls of, the US Army being there and their contribution. You know, they'd seen the semi-trailers carrying supplies, or the tractors, or the soldiers. By the end of the month that we'd spent there, our drawings were up on this wall. They had drawings of our carriers and, our infantry and that sort of thing. And you only had to talk to the kids to say that, oh, no bandits here, no bandits here, Australians here, you know. And that sort of gave you confidence.
One of the things playing on a lot of the guys' minds back in Australia was, did we go over there and bust our ass for nothing? Did we go over there and work just to see the place turn back the way it was when we got back?
It was a part of my life that I had to experience, both personally and professionally. I've experienced that, and it's now a closed chapter.
I think my worst memory of Somalia would be the fact of going over there with my platoon and coming back one short.
You have a certain affinity with the country now because, you know, you were so aptly involved in it. And, you know the people over there, you know the areas. You hear of experiences where, other military forces, having casualties, and you think, oh, I was there. I remember that.
Getting on that Freedom Bird, that was great. Getting on the plane and leaving was great.
When I first got back to Australia, I went on a couple of months' holiday and I went up to my parents and, a car backfired in the street and I just about wet myself.
That's my job. You've got to do something with your life, and this is my choice.
Australia itself should be proud of what the guys did over there. They shouldn't have a bad thing to say about what the guys did over there, because the amount they achieved in the time they were there was incredible, and the amount of the good old Aussie matemanship that come out over there and so on, and the way we worked together and cooperated and achieved a lot more than what people actually thought we did. So Australia should be proud of what they did over there. That's all I've got to say.